And welcome back to the Seery Poetry Library. It's not just poetry, but we call it that. We have all kinds of books. Dad has lots of theology books that we've collected over the years. I think we've even got a couple of Talmuds and a Quran mixed in the bunch. We have DVDs, we have comic books. I'm very big on graphic novels, especially The Long Halloween, and pretty much most Alan Moore stuff. From the 80s and a little bit past that. His later stuff, we won't get into that. But if you read Alan Moore, The Watchmen, of course, is a masterpiece. V for Vendetta is a masterpiece. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The man is brilliant. And I'm very different from him in my style of writing. But I love comic books. I don't usually talk about that too much on Facebook or social media. But I'm a huge comic book fan. I love all kinds of books from all kinds of people. And I remember one thing when I was in high school, they used to make us read certain books. So we had to read Things Fall Apart, Nectar and a Sieve, stories like that. It was during the Clinton years. So there was like this big thing about multiculturalism. That was like the big word that was going around. And you know what I realized? And I realized this as I see students reading certain books in high school, mostly books that they can't relate to or about a different experience than them. You know, like kids in our high school, when I subbed there, were reading To Kill a Mockingbird and reading books like that, Catcher in the Rye and stuff. And these are good works, but they couldn't relate to them. But one of the magical things about poetry that I've discovered is that you find a way to relate to something, even if the experience is very, very different from you. I remember in high school we read Langston Hughes, some of his poetry in one of my English classes. And of course, that's for a white kid in the suburbs, that's a very different experience than what he was writing. But because it's so emotional, it really can break through those boundaries. That's the power of music and poetry and good literature, is that you could be reading something from a very different experience that seems so foreign to you. But if it's really good, it'll find a way to reach you. So today, after that long intro, I'm going to read a couple of poems by Maya Angelou. And again, I'm not an expert on poetry. I haven't read anything she's written. And I'm not actually going to pick out certain ones. I'm just going to briefly, randomly pick a poem and see what it means to me. One more round. There ain't no pay beneath the sun, as sweet as rest when a job's well done. I was born to work up to my grave, but I was not born to be a slave. One more round and let's have it down. One more round and let's heave it down. Papa drove steel, Mama stood guard, and I never heard them holler 'cause the work was hard. But they were born to work up to their graves, but they were not born to be worked out slaves. One more round and let's have it down. One more round and let's have it down. Brothers and sisters, know the daily grind. It was not labor made them lose their minds. They were born to work up to their graves, but they were not born to be worked out slaves. One more round and let's heave it down. One more round and let's heave it down. And now I'll tell you my golden rule. I was born to work, but I ain't no mule. I was born to work up to my grave, but I was not born to be a slave. One more round and let's heave it down. One more round and let's heave it down. Oh, if only I could write like that. That's a great poem. I've actually heard that one before, which helped with the reading, because when I read something for the first time, I'll mispronounce, I'll fumble over my words. That's a great poem for any of us working and any of us struggling. Of course, again, my experience is not like hers. It's very different. But when a poem is as good as this one that I just read, it can break through those boundaries. And it can reach you. It can reach me, the kid that grew up in the suburbs, the kid that works, as an aide at a middle school in the middle of New Jersey, and, as a waiter. It speaks to me because there's something in there. There's a soul in there. There's a power in those words. Let's read another one by Maya real quick, randomly. Greyday. The day hangs heavy, loose and gray, when you're away. A crown of thorns, a shirt of hair, is what I wear. No one knows my lonely heart when we're apart. was good too. I'm going to actually go through this whole book. My problem is I start a lot of books and I don't finish them. I'm finally reading The Dead Zone by Stephen King, which I've started a bunch of times and just never finished. But I'm determined now to finish it, just like I have to finish The Shining, which is a book that I've started a couple of times too. I don't know what it is. A lot of times it's not that I lose interest. It's not that the work is not good. The work could be good. I just tend to start things and not finish them all the time. You should see my screenplays because there's a lot of screenplays that are not finished that I've started maybe 30 and I've finished about 3 or 4. And of those 3 or 4, 1 or 2 of them are adaptations that I can't show to anybody and that I can't really solicit because somebody else owns that. And I don't think, these companies would appreciate me trying to sell their work. But I have a lot of ideas that have since become poems. That's what usually ends up happening to anything that hasn't become a screenplay, like The Last Arcade, Ring and Run, Lost on a Wave is a big one. Now Lost on a Wave is becoming a novel, which I just passed the 100-page mark, and I'm very happy that I did, because passing the 100-page mark for me is a huge milestone. That's 100 pages for me is a Stephen King 800-page book. It's it's that big of a deal that I finished 100 pages and want to keep going because I want to turn that poem into a novel, because there are things that I couldn't say in the poems that I'm able to say in the novel. On the downside of that is that there are certain things that I was able to say great in the poems and really get through to an emotion that I have to do in a much more careful way in the book. So a lot of the supernatural elements of the poem, Lost on a Wave, are there, but they have to be handled in a more subtle way, especially all the stuff about angels and spirits and things like that have to be done. As of now, I'm doing it in a much more careful way because it works so well in a poem, but it's tricky in a novel. So I have my big cup of coffee. I'm going to record a bunch of poems today before Christmas of 2020. So, Merry Christmas, everybody. And we'll be back with more, including a few from my dad. So stay tuned. Bye-bye.